time now to proceed a little bit with my NAS box project out of the Mac Plus, and I'm sure you have probably seen the first episode of this. This is the first video where I'm going to get inside it, and I'm going to explain a little bit more with some visuals as to what I'm going to do. Won't actually get a whole lot done today because I don't have all of the parts I need, but at least I'll be able to figure out what the mechanics of the inside are so that I can decide what board I'm going to use and exactly how I'm going to mount the hard drives. So, first thing obviously, we need to get into this puppy, which is partly easy, partly difficult. Easy part is you have 3 Torx screws, one here, and another one under the battery compartment here. No big deal. We just get those out. T15 screws, by the way. And while I was looking at this housing, I realized that, in fact, it's been exposed to some moisture, so there's some corrosion on a couple of the connectors, which is a bit of a shame, but it doesn't affect my usage of it. I was going to power this up, by the way, to show you that it is in fact working, but I decided against that because I don't want to have to go through discharging the CRT voltages and so on. So, I've taken those 3 Torx screws out. Now, all that remains, is 2 screws very deeply recessed up here. And the reason that I didn't take this apart on the previous video is precisely because I don't have a driver that will fit deep enough. And you can't use an adapter on the end of a multi-purpose screwdriver because as soon as you get a little ways inside here, you find that the screws are behind very, very narrow holes and you need a very thin driver to get in. So, I bought this 6-inch T15 driver. And even with this, I need an extension to be able to use it properly. So I have this crappy little multi-purpose screwdriver here. Let me just get that T15 out of there. Put this extension piece on. And as you can see, even with all of these extensions, it's not easy. And in fact, flip it over like this so that I can get directly to the screws. In. You can see that it's almost not even fitting with all of these extensions and other silliness on it. And get the other one. Now, at this point, all of the Mac disassembly guides back in the long ago era when this stuff actually needed to be serviced would tell you need a Mac cracker tool. I never actually saw one of those in person, but I saw a lot of people said, oh, I adapted one out of a welding clamp or this or that. And apparently, back in the day, it was very difficult to get this back plastic piece off without some kind of additional tool. I have no idea what that actually means because every Mac that I've ever opened, a simple shake like that will get the 2 parts of the case apart. So let's pop this off, put it away for a second, although we want to look at it a little bit more. Let's not lose the 2 screws that just fell out of the handle. And there we go. And what do we have here? Okay, so rotating it a little bit and adjusting the lighting, we have the CRT itself. It's a very nice CRT, by the way. The image quality on these was really superb. I enjoyed it a lot. This is the power supply board. Main power switch, AC input. It provides all of the electron gun voltages, and it also provides the amplified deflection coil voltages here. I believe there's not a whole lot in the way of semiconductors on this board. I believe that the scanning is also done here, but I could be wrong. Let me liberate the camera a bit so that we can walk around. Look a little closer in here. Grab a light as well. You can see that down in there we also have the loudspeaker. It had one mono built-in loudspeaker. You can see the volume control and contrast controls, I believe, also down there. And you can see that the logic board lives on the bottom of the computer and it's fairly heavily shielded. There are only 2 connectors that run to it. There's the floppy drive connector and the like multi-purpose connector that carries video and power supply from the power and deflection board down to the logic board. And like I said, I'm not sure where the actual scanning is done on this. So let me put this light down. Splendid. I'm not sure where the actual scanning is done in this circuit, but the semiconductor count on this board is really low. You know, I'm going to say it probably is. The scanning probably is done here, and I'm going to say it purely on the basis of this inductor. Because I think that would be probably the horizontal width adjustment. In fact, come to think of it, it might be labeled. Oh, how about that? It's not. There's the focus adjustment, which I didn't show you, and the cutoff. And horizontal adjustment width is here. Okay. No, I was right. That is the horizontal width adjustment. The other two things are trim pots. Hey, I'm better than I thought. Now, I'm noticing a small amount of corrosion here, which is unfortunate. This shield is held on, this plastic safety shield is held on with some push-through plastic clips, which I'm going to need to get pliers to. Oh, since we're walking around the board, let's also look here. One of these is a reset switch, and one of them is like a program or interrupt switch. There was a little plastic, like self-adhesive clip-on thing that attached to the ventilation grill here and poked through, and it was called the programmer's switch assembly or something like that. So this is an RF shield, which we can just pull off. And in rather good news, it appears that although there's a little bit of corrosion on this is aluminum and plastic, by the way, although there is a little bit of corrosion on that 9-pin mouse connector there, the rest of the board is in excellent shape. So this board can be removed nice and easily, actually. All we have to do is disconnect this power connector here and the floppy connector, but note that the floppy controller runs like one set of tracks out to this connector, which runs to the internal drive and also to the external drive port. Let me pause this video and go and get a couple of tools, and we'll continue. Okay, so I just had to grab a couple of things there so that I could start this disassembly, but let's start by taking out the main logic board. Pull this, it's a standard IDC type connector, not locked in any way, and fortunately polarized. And this connector too. And we're going to pause a bit once I get this board out so that we can look at it in all its glory. There we go. Okay. Wow. So let's move this out of the way, and this is the main board in all its glory. As I had surmised from the earlier video, we had two flavors of SIMs in here. We have two 1 meg and two 256K. I'm not sure which is which. I'm guessing these are the 1 meg ones. There were some special rules about what kind of RAM you could install. Because the 68000 had a 16-bit data bus, you had to install definitely same size in pairs, but there were also a lot of other special rules that a lot of Macs had about what type and in what combinations you could install RAM, even just over and above the basic RAM on the bus has to match high and low bytes. And also the other reason that I think these are the 1 meg ones is that they have space for a parity chip, which is a newer thing, and the chips themselves are physically smaller, but I could be wrong. So let's look at the dates here. Most of this stuff is dated 8831, 8833, kind of 3/4 of the way through 1988. What's on the board? Well, you've got the RAM, obviously. You've got the 68000. This is a little bit unusual, actually, because every other one that I open, I seem to recall the 68000 actually being socketed, and obviously it's soldered here. I believe these are both the ROMs. They're both copyrighted 85 to 86 or 83 to 86, and they're made by this one at least is made by American Megatrends. I don't recognize that logo. Maybe VLSI. This is Z80 SCC, which I think is a serial communications controller. This is a 6522, which is what is it? A versatile interface adapter, like a GPIO expander, if you want. This chip, I am going to guess, is the SCSI chip, although, again, it's been a long time since I've really looked into this. And there's a bunch of what are probably PALs around here with these things with Apple copyrights on them, plus a bunch of discrete 7.4 LS logic. There's not much else to it. So those are the switches that I was talking about, the reset and programmer switch. This particular board has a part number of 820-0174-Delta, and it's a 4-layer board, at least judging from the fact that there's layer markings here. That's the keyboard connector, mouse connector, internal floppy, external floppy, SCSI, some kind of wire sticking out there. It looks like somebody may have tried to plug something into the SCSI port and messed it up. And those are the 2 serial ports. So not much to it. It looks like there's only one clock source on the entire board, which is this 15.667 whatever megahertz crystal. And with that, I think we can start talking about what we're going to do mechanically in here. So let me pick this board up, put it carefully away. By the way, as I said, that's one of the things that's up for donation if you are repairing a machine and you need parts. And let's look at what this leaves us here in terms of chassis space. I am obviously going to disassemble the rest of it as well. Let's just zoom out and focus. There we go. So what does this leave us? Now, the reason that it would have been easier to use the Mac SE is because the Mac SE had more mounting space in it for internal drives. This chassis has space for one internal floppy drive, and although it doesn't have the holes for it, I believe that it was also possible to install an internal hard drive, which connected to the floppy connector as well. But that was probably a third-party thing, come to think of it. So how am I going to mount all this stuff? Well, first of all, my goal is not to puncture or glue to the plastic. I think I'm going to say, though, that I'm willing to drill, and I'm going to keep this metal sub-chassis in here, because, you know, although it's equally as historical as the rest of the machine, I think that it's not something that many people will need to replace, so I don't really need to offer it to somebody as a spare. You can see, by the way, those ears that I was talking about. So this is the metal band around the edge of the CRT. These are the 4 mounting ears that are either integral to it or welded to it, I'm not sure. And by an amazing stroke of luck, I had purchased some relatively thick black ABS plastic for another project. So as it happens, for this project I only needed squares. I only needed circles, and this is a fairly large, what is it? It's something like 12 inches by 12 inches. You can look up that part number if you care. I think it came from McMaster Car or someone like that. So anyway, the idea here is that I'm going to use this piece of black plastic, and I'm just showing you that it does in fact cover this whole space, and I was really lucky that I didn't put this hole somewhere else. That piece is going to go where the CRT used to be, and then there'll be a square hole cut in it for the monitor, which will be just a simple LCD monitor. The interesting question is, how am I going to mount the drives? Cooling is going to be a real problem in this project because the Mac Plus was, and early Macs were not actively cooled. I think I'm going to have to play that one by ear. I don't really want to put a fan in it if I can possibly avoid it. But I did promise you that I was going to show you one other interesting thing about the housing, and let me see if I can get it on camera in such a way that you can see it. This is the rear housing of the machine, and let me put some light in there. Oh, excellent, you can see it. So, you can see there that the developers and a couple of vendors actually all have their signatures in there. I'll just zoom in a little bit so that you can see that in a little more detail. It's also interesting that the I think this was a vapor deposited aluminum shielding layer that has started to come off. It shouldn't affect the texture of the plastic itself, but it has started to rot somewhat, so that's a shame. You can see the signatures of various people there. Very cool. That's not done very much anymore. There's also something written at the bottom of the housing here, which I'm not sure the meaning of. This IB or I8, not sure what that is. Also not sure even if it was written there pre or post manufacture, but it was just another interesting little tidbit about this particular machine. You can also see that it's filthy, and that was definitely dirt that was encountered during normal use, because what would happen is you'd get a static charge on the CRT that would attract dust, and the dust would get charged up, get flung off, and then stick to the sides of the housing. So a very normal sort of thing. And similar filth inside here. Anyway, now you know what I'm going to do, and probably you have a better idea of how I'm going to do it. I'm going to now go and figure out exactly what kind of mini computer I want to put in here, and I'm also going to pull all the components out of this, the front of this box, and pack them up carefully so that somebody who wants them can have them at some other time.